Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us for Queering Education today. We're super excited to have you. My name is Frederick. My pronouns are they, them. I am Out Youth's Texas Gender and Sexuality Alliance Network Coordinator. I will be handling the recording and tech side of things today, and my counterpart E will be moderating the chat, so feel free to ask questions in there as we go along, and I will turn it over to them.
Hi, everyone. I'm E. I am the founder and president of the Central Texas GSA Coalition, as well as the founder of Queering Education. So I'm so happy to have you all here today for this awesome presentation about how to use stories and numbers as an effective tool to advocate for policy change in schools. So now I'm going to turn it over to Meg and let them do their thing.
Hi, y'all. I'm not totally sure what you're seeing, so can everyone hear and see okay? I'll take that.
You're good.
Okay, great. So yes, thank you so much for having me. My name is Meg Bishop. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a PhD student at UT Austin working in the Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Health and Rights Lab under Dr. Stephen Russell. My research broadly focuses on LGBTQ young people, their identity development, and their school experiences. And that research is in service of promoting the health and well-being of queer young people. And I'm super excited to be here today in a community of people with similar interests and passions. And I'm excited to talk to you about the Stories and Numbers project, which is a project that's a partnership between our lab at UT Austin, Out Youth, and the Texas GSA Network, and Equality Texas. And the purpose of the project is to use research to tell stories to help LGBTQ young people thrive in schools. And so today I'm going to be spending just a little bit of time telling you why we're doing what we're doing, what the Stories and Numbers project is, and then we'll talk about how this project can best serve your schools and communities. So since you're here, I realize I'm preaching a little bit to the choir, so I'm not going to spend too much time on why it's important to care about LGBTQ young people in schools. But quickly, the idea behind Stories and Numbers is to link our stories with all of the data and research that we have. So here are some numbers to support what we all in this room know, which is that sexual and gender minority youth are too often treated unequally at school. And that can be by other students, by teachers, or administrators at schools. And in the past 10 years, we've started collecting data on LGBTQ young people to understand better these inequities and their consequences with the purpose of making positive change. And so this is some data from the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is one of the government's main sources of data on the health and well-being of young people in school. And essentially what we see is that sexual minority youth are being bullied at school at almost double the rate of heterosexual youth. And the same goes for trans youth in school. So this is also data from the CDC, which shows that trans young people report being bullied at about twice the rate as their cis peers. And we also know that this kind of bias-based harassment is associated with all the things that school is meant to protect young people from, including at-risk behaviors like substance use, mental health issues like depression and suicidality, compromised academic success, and the feeling that school is a safe place to be. So that's the bad news, but the good news though is that we now have about a decade's worth of research about what works for making schools better for queer young people. So what works to reduce homophobia, transphobia, and to support young LGBTQ young people to thrive at school. And the other piece of good news is that our team has been traveling around Texas and all over the country for the past few years. And what we've learned is that there are tons of people, like the people on this call, who are really on board with wanting to make schools a safe and supportive space for LGBTQ youth. And so the barrier isn't so much intention or desire, but rather it's having the tools to know how to do that. So the Stories and Numbers project is making use of this decade's worth of research we now have to provide folks in schools with evidence-based tools and strategies that we know work. And so what we know from the research is that there are 4 major strategies that work to help keep LGBTQ young people safe and supported in school. So these are inclusive and enumerated policies, school personnel support and training, student-led clubs like gender sexuality alliances, and access to LGBTQ related resources and curricula. And so there's this large and really consistent body of research that shows that these strategies are effective and make all students safer. And so ultimately, one of our goals with Stories and Numbers is to get this research out there in ways that are useful to people like y'all in the room that can use it to do things like talk to principals and make positive change at your school. So that's the motivation for this resource that we've developed that I'm going to focus on today, which is called the Stories and Numbers Project. And through this project, we developed a website that summarizes this research around the strategies that we know work and helps you use that research to tell your story to make positive change for LGBTQ students at your school. And so this is what the landing page of the website looks like. It's where you can check out stories from students and teachers, see what the research says, and also find other resources like fact sheets and research briefs. And I'll talk about all the ways that you can use this website a little bit later, but I just wanted to give you a sneak peek of the landing page for right now. And so the website is set up around providing stories, numbers, and resources related to these evidence-based strategies that we know work. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those strategies, as well as provide some research-based recommendations related to each strategy. And I'll show you some of the stories that are featured on our website. So first we have inclusive and enumerated policies. So these are anti-bullying and non-discrimination policies that explicitly list the status characteristics that are protected by the policy. So for example, an inclusive and enumerated policy would explicitly say that you can't discriminate against people based on their actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity, whereas a non-enumerated policy would say something like, we don't tolerate bullying at this school. And there are plenty of states that have these kinds of laws at the statewide level. Texas is not one of these states, so it's especially important for us to work at the local and district level to make sure districts and schools have inclusive policies. And there is research now that shows that these policies are associated with feeling safer at school, with better academic achievement, less suicidality, and less bullying. And the amazing thing about this research is that no matter what kind of research method you use, so whether you're looking at individual students at schools, the schools, or at the statewide level, we see that students are safer when these policies are in place. So that means that both LGBTQ and non-LGBTQ students do better when these policies are in place. And that's one message that this area of research really helps establish, is that these strategies and policies aren't only good for LGBTQ youth, but they actually benefit the entire school community regardless of sexual or gender identity. So now here are some research-based recommendations about advancing inclusive and enumerated policies in your schools and communities. So basically the gold standard is to enact these policies at the statewide level. And there are currently 15 states that have these kinds of policies. And we think Texas needs to be added to this list. But in the meantime, school personnel can establish local policies about what is done in that specific school or in even that specific classroom. We also need to learn more about these policies and advocate for them, because if we don't know what the policy is in our school or district, we can't improve upon them. And educators, parents, and students can raise awareness and request these policies. And throughout the presentation today, I'm going to be featuring some of the stories we have on our website associated with the strategies that we're going to be discussing. And so here's how one family talks about the need for inclusive and enumerated policies at schools.
Hi, my name is Matthew Shedd. This is my awesome husband, Jim, and we are parents with two wonderful kids in the school district. We grew up gay in Texas, so we know what it's like, and kind of led to our advocacy work for LGBTQ youth in our district and our city. I think some questions that come up for families are like, what if a kid asks why another kid has two moms? How should a teacher handle that? Or even like at a middle school level, if someone uses the word gay as a derogatory phrase, or someone comes out to a staff member as bisexual or trans, what is the appropriate response? And I've heard several kids in our district say that when they have an issue, they go to administration, but administration doesn't really know how to handle it. So they say, oh, it's a school board issue, and the school board doesn't want to handle it, so it goes back to administration, and it goes back and forth until some little issue has become this giant mammoth full of pain and negativity when it could have been avoided if there was a clear-cut policy. That's why it's so important for teachers and staff, counselors, anyone who comes in contact with our kids on a daily basis to have a clear policy, because if they don't know how to handle these difficult, sensitive situations, how are they going to model that behavior for our children?
Okay, so the second evidence-based safe school strategies that we're going to discuss today are GSAs, also known as gender sexuality alliances. And I know that there have already been some really great talks about GSAs as part of queering education. So today I'll just speak a little bit about what the research says about GSAs. So first, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, what are GSAs? So GSAs, or gender sexuality alliances, are student-led clubs that support, educate, and advocate for LGBTQ issues. And so GSAs really represent all of the organizing that young people do together to affirm and support each other and to fight for equity. And the GSA research is really compelling. There's data from California from over 1 million students in schools that shows that the presence of a GSA has an influence on feelings of safety, academic achievement, and on well-being for students. And what's really amazing is that not only do we see these results reported from individual students who are in GSAs, but when we survey students and we look at the school level, we see that schools with GSAs are also associated with safety and well-being. And so again, we're seeing that this strategy doesn't only influence the students who are in GSAs or the LGBTQ students, the strategy really benefits everyone who's associated with the school environment. And so here are evidence-based recommendations specific to GSAs. So professional associations can raise awareness of the power of GSAs and encourage educators to act as GSA advisors. And we actually have a research brief on the Stories and Numbers website specifically about how to be a good GSA advisor that you can check out and share if that's of interest. School personnel need to learn how to support GSAs, and students can advocate for them. There is really good legal precedent suggesting that you can't be told that you can't have a student-led club you can't have a GSA in your school if you are allowed to have a student-led club in your school. But we still hear stories about people being told that they can't. And if you are someone who is encountering that issue, please get in touch with one of us at Stories and Numbers or with the ACLU of Texas who can provide support with that. And students, like some of the amazing ones organizing this series, should continue to advocate for and lead GSAs as well. And now we're going to hear from someone who might look familiar about the importance of GSAs at their school.
Hi, I'm Elle, and I'm a rising senior at Cedar Ridge High School in Round Rock ISD. I think GSAs are really valuable organizations because they bring people together, both in the LGBT community and among our allies. These organizations also help bolster academic performance and provide a better sense of community in our school as a whole, even for people who are not members of the club. Because I find so much value in these organizations, I founded the Central Texas GSA Coalition, which brings together GSAs in schools all across the Central Texas area. So we can work together on projects, tell each other our stories, and collaborate to bring together a better future for our community and for the world.
Okay, so the next research-based strategy is professional development around LGBTQ issues. So this is what are we actually doing with professionals in schools to create a positive climate. And when researchers ask young people about what matters for feeling good at school, many say that having supportive educators is really important, and rightly so, because these supportive teachers are linked to students' academic success and mental health. And on the, on the educator side, teachers have been shown to react better to bias-based bullying with training and to be more supportive. And the other thing that we know really matters is administrative leadership. There are really big differences in schools where principals lead or are afraid, and so we need professional development for principals and administrators around these issues as well. And so in terms of professional development, one point of intervention is schools of education. So you can get an entire degree in education and never talk about LGBT issues in school. And we think that's a problem that needs to be updated, because once teachers are in the classroom, they have so much more on their plate to think about and consider. And so this is a really early point of intervention that can be really effective. Another space for intervention is professional education associations. So we've been traveling to conferences for these professional education associations and presenting our work, and it's been really well received. And we've also been getting feedback that this is the first or second session they've ever seen at these conferences that are focused on LGBTQ issues. So we need to increase the presence of these topics at these professional education conferences. And school personnel can use our website to make a case for why they should receive this sort of training. And parents and students can ask for this training. So that's a great question that parents can ask school administrators when they meet to discuss their child's progress in school. And so here's a video by our parents again discussing why professional development is crucial for LGBTQ students.
So hi, I'm Jim, this is Matt. We are married parents to two wonderful Chaos Tornado 5-year-old twins. So we're better known as Daddy Jim and Daddy Matt. We've had a great experience here at AISD, and I think it's the result of training and prepared teachers on how to deal with issues specific to our family and to our kids. And so more specifically, one of the more fraught days for us as a two-dad family is Mother's Day. And the teacher for one of the pre-K classrooms here in AISD saw it coming and intervened in a way that, that I think everybody really enjoyed. So instead of a specific Mother's Day event that had all mothers and us and our kid off to the side, the teacher intervened and changed it to an all-parents breakfast. So moms, dads, everybody got to come. Everybody got a taco. It was a wonderful morning. And it's particularly impressive when you think that statewide, 74% of teachers have had to not intervene in an instance of anti-LGBT harassment just because of professional pressure. Whereas here, we've been lucky enough to have a teacher that saw a potential issue come up, made adjustments that really everybody enjoyed, and everybody got to have fun, and everybody got to have a taco.
We know tacos are important here in Texas. So finally, we have LGBTQ related resources in schools. So these are LGBTQ inclusive curricula, posters on walls, and books in the library. And again, there's a really great science suggesting that having these kinds of resources is really important, that they're linked to school safety and they're linked to health. And so these are our recommendations regarding LGBTQ related resources. So we need to be infusing our curriculum with LGBTQ topics and history. This is one of the most important things that students talk about in the research, is learning about LGBTQ people in their coursework. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it's really hard to see yourself in a specific role if there's never been anyone who looks or seems like you in that role. And infusing our curricula with LGBTQ history and topics is the way that we can do that. So we need to make these resources available in classrooms, in libraries, and we should advocate for these resources. And here's a video from a local librarian about the need for LGBTQ inclusive resources at school.
Hi, I'm Ashley Cross, the librarian here at O'Henry Middle School. And I just want to say I've worked super hard in this library to curate books that are inclusive of everyone. Especially we have a lot of LGBTQ books. I even have had students feel comfortable enough to come to me in the library and say, hey, Ms. Cross, do you have a book about a gay romance? And this just shows how comfortable and safe our students feel here at this school. And I just want to hopefully spread that inclusivity and open-mindedness and comfort for students across the community. And I hope that other libraries and other pieces of the community get on board with this.
So another component of the Stories and Numbers project is to focus on the emerging research that is specific to trans and gender nonconforming students. And this research is really newer. When I talked about how there had been all this research in the past 10 years, it's really been this broad bucket of LGBTQ students as a whole. And we haven't really had many specific studies on trans and gender nonconforming students. But in the last few years, this research has really been emerging, and we have some really great new work. In the lab where I work, which is Dr. Stephen Russell's lab specifically, there's been some amazing new research on how students who are able to use their preferred name have dramatic reductions in mental health risk, such as depression and suicidality. And so in a study with 129 trans youth, Dr. Russell and his team found that trans youth who can use their preferred name at home, at school, at work, and with friends had the lowest levels of mental health issues. And so in terms of recommendations, one starting place is to use young people's preferred names and to advocate for the use of these names on school records and forms. And we should all learn more about understanding and supporting gender identity in the form of professional development. And as always, we need to intervene in bias-based bullying and in transphobic bullying. And we need to know our school community's policies about gender identity and expression. And if those policies aren't enumerated and inclusive, we need to work on updating those policies so that they are. And here's one student's experience about trans-specific policies at their school.
75% of trans and non-binary youth feel unsafe at school due to their gender identity or expression, especially in bathrooms, locker rooms, and gym class. I used to have a friend who was trans, and he always had to use like gender neutral like staff bathrooms instead of the normal like public bathrooms for students. And I remember I was in gym class with him, and the gym teacher made him use the girls' locker room even though he was a guy. That's why it's important for schools to be inclusive of trans and non-binary youth by using their chosen name and pronouns, supporting GSA groups, and intervening in bullying.
Okay, so today I've really featured the stories part of Stories and Numbers to show you how this research plays out for folks in our communities. But we actually have lots more resources in addition to stories on our website. And so now I'm gonna show you some of the other really amazing features we have on the site. So again, this is our landing page. And on our landing page, we have a big button to download our state schools policy brief. And that brief contains all of the research and recommendations that I presented today. And it's a really good tool for making the research work for the change you want to see at the school, district, or policy level. And we also have a button where you can sign up to receive email updates from us. So we're not going to spam you or send you an email every day, but that's a way to receive monthly emails when new resources are added to our page. So we have this stories section, and then we also have the numbers section of our website. And on that section of the website, we have research about each of the strategies that we discussed, broken down into 1 or 2 page briefs. And those are nice if you are focused on just one of these initiatives. You can kind of bring this one pager to a meeting with a principal or a teacher, and it's not so overwhelming. It's not a big book of information that they have to move through or consider. And we also have additional research briefs that we've developed as issues have arisen in our community. So I think many of the folks on this call know that Texas sex ed curricula is being considered early next week. And so we have developed a research brief specific to comprehensive and inclusive sexuality education in response to some of the controversy that was going on in Travis County in the past year. And so we are always interested in writing these research briefs in response to issues in our community. And then we have a resources section of the webpage that's kind of like an FAQ section where you can get specific questions about each strategy answered and links to additional information. So for example, this is our resources page specific to GSAs. You'll see there are specific questions, and then there are links out to additional resources that can be really useful when you're trying to work on some of these issues in your school community. And finally, we have a research database section of our website that is obviously still being developed and still being worked on. But the idea is that it's going to be a searchable database of research related to the safe school strategies that we discussed today. And so if you're a teacher, this can be a curricular tool for teaching students how to conduct research about a specific topic. Or if you're a researcher or work at a nonprofit, this could be a really nice one-stop shop when you're writing a grant. Or even if you're a policymaker and you'd like to back up your position with science, this can work for that as well. And so I just want to end by saying that this is a continued effort, and we're always collecting stories about LGBTQ young people's experiences in school. So if you'd like to share a story, please contact me or someone else affiliated with the Stories and Numbers Project, and we would love to hear your story and share it. And so with that, I'll end by saying thank you to Queering Education for hosting us. I'm also happy to answer questions. And I know this is usually the time in the presentation where listeners ask questions. And of course, I'm happy to do that. But I would also love to hear from you about your needs and your perspective. And so I also prepared some questions that I would love folks on the call's insight on if you're comfortable sharing. And you can feel free to answer any or all of these questions. And with that, I will say thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meg. We really appreciate your participation and all of your wisdom and insight. And I feel like it's so helpful to be able to back up these things that a lot of us in the queer community already know, but to be able to back it up with actual science and data. So we definitely want to encourage y'all to use the chat, answer these questions that we've got up here for you. And if you have questions for us, definitely throw those in. Like Meg mentioned, the State Board of Education is currently working on revising the sex ed curriculum for the first time since 1997. And we strongly encourage you to check out the research brief on the importance of comprehensive and inclusive sex education. Registration is open today and tomorrow to testify at Monday's SBOE meeting. We strongly encourage you to voice your opinion with your elected officials as well, because they are elected to represent you. So yeah, have at the chat. Definitely let us know any questions, comments, thoughts, and what else you would like to see.
So I just dropped 2 links in the chat related to the State Board of Education revision of the Texas Health Education TEKS. So if you want to check those out, the first one just has a little bit of information about it, along with some resources about giving testimony if that's something you choose to do. And then the second one is a link to the Texas Education Agency's website, and that has all of the information about the process for signing up to testify. And at the bottom of the page is the link to fill out the form. And testimony is assigned on a first come, first served basis. The site opened at 8 o'clock this morning. So definitely, if you want to testify, sign up sooner rather than later, so that way you'll get an earlier slot. And I see someone dropped a question in the Q&A. Have you considered, or have you considered partnering with the UT School of Education to help educate our future educators?
Yes, and in fact, we have done school-specific trainings where we go and present some of our research, and so we are definitely open to partnering with folks and coming and presenting. And if that's something that you're interested in, please, again, feel free to reach out to us, and we would be happy and excited to work with you. Thanks for that question.
Meg, that question reminds me of conversations that we had when we were just starting out with Stories and Numbers, about the importance of this kind of support and professional development for all kinds of school professionals. So thinking about things like, you know, who are the people enforcing which bathrooms students use on campuses? You know, making sure that bus drivers are trained to intervene if they witness harassment and bullying. So it really, like, a lot of, and obviously because teachers spend so much time with students, we want them to be really well equipped to have these conversations and to intervene. But there are also so many other adults in different roles at schools that we really want to get this kind of training and to have this kind of professional support too. Can you speak to what other, so in addition to like schools of education, what other kinds of professional associations or groups y'all have spoken to about this?
Yeah, so we have, I believe the past 3 years, we've gone to the Texas School Social Workers Conference, and we've been super well received at that conference. And that's one of the places where people are essentially like begging for information on what they can do. So it's not that people are not interested in supporting this cause and doing everything they can do. I think we're really in a space where people just need some more information about how to make the change rather than being convinced that it's a thing that's worth doing. So the School Social Workers Conference is one. I know that Dr. Russell also went and presented at the I don't remember the formal name, but it was the conference for math teachers. And he went and spoke with math teachers about what they could do to make math more LGBTQ inclusive. And that's not necessarily the first subject we think of when we think of spaces, you know, where we can infuse the curriculum with inclusivity. But, you know, for example, things like word problems, like, you know, when you're giving an example of a word problem using people whose genders don't imply that they're different, or, you know, there are lots of really creative ways to make your curriculum more inclusive. And so, yeah, we've also worked a little bit with librarians to help develop, as you saw from the video, help develop some of the materials that we've been creating. And so, yeah, I just want to echo what you're saying, Frederick, that this is not just an issue that matters for teachers or for administrators, but, you know, a school community is made up of lots of people beyond beyond those kinds of folks, and lots of people can create positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea that, like, you're talking about math problems, and, there's no reason that Jamal and Jose aren't getting a mortgage together, and one of the sessions that we had, I think it was yesterday. We've done a lot of these, but one of the things that E brought up in one of these sessions was how easy it is to incorporate LGBTQ historical figures in the content. And so if you're in a computer science class, just, mentioning Alan Turing, if you're talking about any subject, there are queers everywhere. We've been everywhere, we've done it all. And so it's not difficult to include LGBTQ content in education in ways that still fit with the TEKS. E, do you want to speak more to that?
I mean, yeah, so I think in addition to that, especially for teachers tell stories. They talk about their lives. They talk about like going to the grocery store to get cat food. So I think it's really easy to incorporate queerness in the classroom, even if it has nothing to do with what you're teaching about. Like I have one teacher who just talks about NASCAR races for like 45 minutes of every class, doesn't have anything to do with statistics at all, but that's what she does. And so, if you're in a subject or in a particular unit of something where you're finding that like there's not really a good way to connect the curriculum that you're teaching about to something that's like queer related, I think there are always opportunities to just be like, I don't know, talk about the fact that you were watching Pose last night or anything. So I think, it's okay to, teachers already share bits of their personal lives in the classroom. So I think it's okay to share that with your students, even if it's a little off topic. It can be a little brain break moment. Even if you just find like YouTube videos with queer people in them, that's always a good option. But yeah, with curriculum, I think especially in the humanities, like history and English and stuff, super easy. There are always books written by queer authors with queer characters. There are a ton of queer historical figures. Every era in history has had queer people. So yeah, I think that, there are a lot of avenues to kind of integrate queerness into schools.
And I know one of the questions that I get at the Texas GSA Network is how teachers can move through this landscape in Texas, given that we have the quote, no promo homo laws on the books. But in doing some research on it, the actual statute that law is tied to was repealed because it was directly linked to the laws about sodomy and like how sodomy was illegal. And so since those laws have been repealed, even though the laws that say you can't promote homosexuality in schools are still on the books, there's nothing to back it up. I'm not a lawyer, but
yeah, I also know that there is a ton of ambiguity in the way that law is written, probably because of what you're saying, Frederick, that it's not really it doesn't match contemporary like policy anymore. And so I do think that ambiguity is intentional, but also what it means is that it would be really hard to enforce. So I think it's much more a matter of the norms of the schools at this point than it is backed by any legal precedent. So yeah, I don't think that is something that should necessarily be a factor in whether or not you talk about those things. My understanding is also, and I am also not a lawyer, but my understanding is also that law was specific to sexuality education. So I don't know that the law was just that you can't talk about gay stuff at school. I think it was you can't promote homosexuality when you are teaching sex education. So there's even more, constraint than basically. I don't think that's something that our educators necessarily need to worry about from a legal perspective. The culture of the school may be a different thing, but the culture of the school is also malleable, and that's what we're talking about today. So
yeah, I definitely want to echo that. I know that a lot of teachers in my school have been hesitant to talk about, queerness or race or anything that is considered a controversial topic, not because of any legal repercussions, but because of all of the pushback from parents that they might receive. And so I think that's definitely a bigger consideration for teachers, sort of culturally, and something that you have to figure out how to navigate. And I think that if you can find administrators and other faculty members, even if you just form like a cohort of teachers who are on your side, that can be really helpful if you want to be able to address more sensitive topics, I guess, in your classroom without facing potential employment repercussions.
Yeah, and I think that's why, it's so important to have these parent voices and these student voices to kind of signal that, hey, even if there is a parent that expresses some concern over that, there might be 5 more parents who really want that information taught in school. And so making your voice heard in your school community, I think, is one of the best things you can do. And the research bears that out, so.
Yeah, I know that the Texas campaign to prevent teen pregnancy recently did a statewide poll. I think it was like 600 people that was specifically looking for what support for teaching sex education looked like in Texas, and it was astronomical across the board. Overwhelming majority supported comprehensive and inclusive sex education, but there was also a huge portion of folks that they polled who supported teaching respect for the LGBTQ community in Texas. And so one of the underlying messages that they had was respect is a Texas value. And I think that that's one of those things that we can really take to schools and say, look, like, we've got the research, we've got the polling, the public is on board at this point, and we need to be on the right side of history. Like, we need to be supportive of all of our community members. If you could find the poll results and drop it in the chat.
Yes, doing it now.
I know. On top of it.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, we are at a point where there aren't necessarily legal precedents, and so it's just a matter of which side of the argument has the loudest voices. And so that's why it's so important to do things like show up for these school board, hearings, and make sure that if you are supportive of these strategies and you're part of a school community, that your voice is heard, because as we've seen, these things aren't necessarily backed by legal precedent at this point. And so it becomes an even more important context for making your voice heard.
And it looks like we have about 10-12 minutes left, so we definitely want to leave room for questions. If y'all want to use the chat and have a conversation with us, if you want to use the Q&A and ask specific questions, we're definitely open to that. This recording will be available on the Queering Education website, hopefully by the end of next week. It might be the week after, but it will be up there at some point. And so you can share it out with folks as well if you think that it would be useful for them. But yeah, we definitely encourage you to participate in the chat. And if we don't have other questions, that's totally okay too. We don't want to hold you up. Give you back about 10 minutes. Meg, thank you so much for joining us. We love having you as always. And we hope that folks will join us for our next queering education sessions. We have 2 scheduled next week. One is on how to access reproductive health care if you are under 18 in Texas. And we have one on finding queer-friendly employment as well. And we will be adding more sessions to our calendar in queering education as we get our speakers booked. And we really, are super excited to have y'all. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And if y'all feel more comfortable asking questions via email or in a written way, our email for our website is up on this slide. So thanks again, y'all.
I'm also going to drop, we have a feedback form, so I'm going to drop that in the chat real quick. And that's also a good way just to let us know what you thought. Yeah. So if you want to fill that out, you can. You don't have to, but we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and the short URL for it is feedback.queering.education. And there's no .com or .org or anything after that. It's just feedback.queering.education.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. And I hope I'll see y'all soon.
Bye.
Bye.